Good day, and welcome to our webinar on self-service analytics and ditching the spreadsheets, brought to you by CFE Media and Technology and sponsored by TrendMiner. Today, we'll be joined by TrendMiner's Nick Petrosian, Data Analytics Engineer, and Frederick Mota, Customer Success Manager. I'm Kevin Parker, an editor with CFE Media and Technology. Traditional methods for analyzing and understanding data were limited to labor-intensive spreadsheets and the kind of manual reporting prone to human error. Subject matter experts weren't equipped with skills or tools to interpret complex data sets. Stay tuned to this webinar to learn about a self-service industrial analytics software designed by engineers for engineers. It enables sound decision-making by subject matter experts, process engineers, and technicians, as well as the recognition of patterns found in time series data. To get the best results from the webcast platform, please make note of the following if you participate in today's event. If you are having technical problems with audio or the slide presentation, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to bring up a list of system checks to make. If you are experiencing issues with your slides or audio, please refresh the browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's headshot. If you need a technician, type a message into the Ask a Question box and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. Individual technical questions will be answered in the Answered Questions area. During the presentation, you can use the Ask a Question box to type questions for the live Q&A session at the end. You may ask questions at any time during the presentation. We'll get to as many as time allows. To download the presentation slides and certificate of completion, use the Event Resources box on the left-hand side of the screen. You can download the presentation and certificate of completion until the conclusion of the webcast. The link will break when the webcast signs off. This webcast is being recorded, including the Q&A session. We'll send you an email within a week with a direct link to the webcast archive. Now we will hear from the sponsor of today's webcast, TrendMiner. At the conclusion of the video, you may experience a few seconds of silence to compensate for varied internet speeds. Please stay tuned for today's presentation, which will include a live software demo.
Based on our experience as data scientists for process manufacturing, we have built TrendMiner to empower engineers with advanced time series analytics without the need for them to be data scientists.
The team consists of a group of specialists who combine their engineering knowledge with deep analytics experience. Over the years, we developed a best practices approach on onboarding our customers. This approach is an approach that delivers immediate business value to our users.
Our users can search through years of historical data in a matter of seconds to find out what happened, why it happened, and to find root causes to avoid bad process and asset performance.
It took me 4 hours to do something which I can do in 15 minutes with this program.
Our customers can solve unsolved cases, avoid abnormal situations, and find new areas for improvement, because the data tells the story.
Welcome back. I'd now like to introduce today's panel members. Nick Petrosian is a chemical engineer whose passion is solving problems through collaboration and data-driven decision-making. As a data analytics engineer at TrendMiner, Nick draws on his extensive experience in manufacturing and data analytics to lead customers through to use case resolution. Nick holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University at Buffalo. Between 2011 and 2018, Nick worked as a technology engineer at BASF Corporation. Frederick Mota is an expert in applied data analytics and process control in the chemical industry. His role as Customer Success Manager at TrendMiner allows him to combine this expertise in analytics with his passion for helping customers maximize their success. Frederick holds a Master of Science in Chemical Engineering from KU Leuven and UPM Madrid. Between 2011 and 2016, he worked as a process control engineer at IPCOS, where he was responsible for PID tuning, design, and programming of control architectures on different DCS systems, and the design and implementation of advanced process control. Frederick, welcome to today's webinar, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. So, looking at today's agenda, we're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about the topic of today, which is digital spreadsheets, but also go a little bit further and ask ourselves the question, but then what? Before we have a look at TrendMiner's key capabilities, including a product demo, as mentioned before. And then to wrap up, we'll also talk about the next step. So once you've decided to trial self-service analytics, how can you make yourself successful and fit it in your digitalization journey? Okay, before we talk about ditching the spreadsheets, let's talk about some of the common challenges that arise in the manufacturing industry. And we just took a few here. For example, on the upper right-hand side, time is money. Being able to reduce the time between a process event occurring on the factory floor and actually taking decisions, that is key. So having the infrastructure in place to identify certain events and take immediate data-driven action is really important. But it's also what we've seen across industry is that there's this kind of friction field between being completely data-driven and still relying on a lot of experience and gut feeling by your most experienced operators or engineers. And what TrendMiner tries to do is break down that barrier and actually find a common ground to get the best of both worlds. But these are just some of the common challenges that we see across the industry. Now, as every company goes into their analytics or digitalization journey, one of the first questions they ask, or one of the first goals they have, is trying to get more business insights, and actually not only insights, but also outcomes from the data that they're capturing from all kinds of sensors, data sources, and bringing together centrally. The first reaction people have to this is, well, we should actually hire more data scientists. Data scientists or analytics engineers or data experienced people. But what they soon find out is that there's not enough of these profiles available on the market. Right? It's a very competitive market, and finding those unicorns that actually combine data scientists backgrounds or being very data mature, that can combine that profile with having engineering background, having worked in manufacturing, that is even more rare, right? And this is where TrendMiner's mission statement comes from: democratizing analytics, empowering everybody else, empowering the whole organization to become data-driven. That is the mission statement of TrendMiner. That's what we're trying to accomplish in the manufacturing industry. If we take a closer look at what that means, I talked about a barrier already. Typically, engineers and operators, they'll be on the left-hand side of this diagram. They are typically looking for answers on the questions, what has happened and why did it happen? So root cause analysis. Typical tools used for these kind of questions are trending lines, Excel, spreadsheets. We typically call these people analytics aware. Then if you look on the right-hand side, when you're looking more at the predictive and prescriptive side, what will happen next? What is most likely to happen in my plant? And what should I do about it? That's really the domain of the data science. And these profiles typically use tools such as RStudio, Python, or MATLAB. Scripting capabilities are really important for these people. And what exists in between is kind of a wall. There's kind of a barrier in between. And okay, there is some collaboration. There is some overlap in projects that are being executed, but it's mostly on an ad hoc basis that there's interaction. And we really believe in breaking down this barrier, bringing these two types of profiles together, because in the middle, that's where the magic happens. It's when you bring that process expertise together with the data savvy of people on the right-hand side. That's where the magic happens. All right. So we already talked about trending clients and Excel, but let's have a look at why these tools are not sufficient or not enough on their own. Well, I'll be the first one to admit that you can actually accomplish a lot in spreadsheets, right? As Kevin introduced me, I worked at a lot of different companies as a consultant, and still the easiest way to get a batch of data is get it into Excel and then start working from there. So I'll be the first one to admit that you can do a lot, but there's a couple of very important constraints that you have to take into account. First of all, it's not ideal for specifically time series analytics or time series data. If you want to look for patterns, for example, that's already really hard to do in Excel. Second of all, you start struggling with data volume. I think everybody can relate if you have a spreadsheet with about 100 megabytes, 200 megabytes of data, which is not a whole lot. You already start running into trouble. You might even crash the program, or your workstation or laptop will hang. So that becomes a bottleneck real quick, especially also if you want to share your work. That becomes difficult. Version control is another topic, right? Even though with the advent of cloud tooling or network storage, that's become less of an issue. Still, people will send over a certain version over email, then you rely on somebody else to put it back on the network drive. So that sharing and version control is not ideal. And finally, it's not particularly suited for real-time analytics. So if you want to, reduce that time between the process event and taking action, that real-time aspect is not really what Excel shines at, which also means that results may remain hidden, right? Those, if you want to shoot out an alert on a certain process event, you have to have Excel open to see it, otherwise it's not going to work. And also, if somebody else pulls in data into Excel, they open a new spreadsheet, they will not have access to all the analysis that I already did maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago. So they're always lacking that context of previous analysis that has happened. The answer for a lot of people has been a trending client. And I've used trending clients as well, many, many times, and they really shine in data exploration, doing some visual pattern recognition, trying to eyeball what's going on in your process, seeing trends happening, if the temperature goes up or down, you can very easily see this. You can even do some simple calculations, although still, I'd say most of the analytics will still be done in Excel. They can get you a long way, but I'd say there's still quite a few missing capabilities. For example, being able to do some easy searches. What I used to do when I saw a certain pattern, I wanted to see if it happened before. Well, my only resort would be scrolling back in time, trying to see if I would recognize it. So having real, let's say, good search capabilities, and then from there troubleshooting is not necessarily what trending clients are built for. Labeling of events, learning capabilities, so adding my context to the trend, and even setting up early warnings for upcoming deviations is not what these tools are for, and that's where TrendMiner can actually come in. So if we look at TrendMiner's architecture and how we add value on top of the real-time data infrastructure, it all starts from the data archive. Now, I want to make it really clear that TrendMiner is not a historian, right? TrendMiner lives on top of your data infrastructure, bringing in data from your historian, your data historian, maybe from some SQL databases, maybe adding some third-party connectivity to context systems or LIMS systems, lab systems. The goal of TrendMiner is bringing this data together so you have it in an easy, centralized place to start your data analysis. On top of that, we allow for what we call an asset framework. So some historians already have out-of-the-box asset frameworks, in which case we will integrate it seamlessly with TrendMiner, or you can use TrendMiner to build your own asset framework. The whole goal here is to make your data asset aware, so you're not just working on one tag, one data point. You're actually working within, let's say, the structure of your manufacturing facility. From there, this is just a stepping stone towards asset analytics. So being able to, for example, execute cross-asset searches. If you find certain conditions on one pump, have they ever been replicated on other pumps or heat exchangers or other types of assets? Have I seen them there before? That's another way of leveraging that asset framework. On top of that, TrendMiner allows you to contextualize your time series data. So I already talked about context a couple of times. You're able to create events on top of your time series data that everybody else in the organization can see. So if they're looking at certain temperature or flow readings in a certain asset, they will have access to the context that's been created by your colleagues. So you're always aware of what's going on. And I can even say not only manual creation, I can also use business rules, conditions, what we call fingerprints, like think operating zones. I can set those up in TrendMiner to automatically create those events, those warnings, so that they be captured also going towards the future. One really important aspect to finalize this is that to be successful in deploying a new tool, a self-service analytics tool, you need to stay aligned with existing workflows and processes. So it's always possible to send out alerts from TrendMiner to, for example, my mobile phone, to a text message or to an email. but I can actually also integrate with third-party tooling to stay within my existing workflows. So for example, if I want to send out an alert about a pump that's in a bad condition, I can send this right away to, for example, an SAP maintenance system where a notification gets created. And so from there, it stays within the normal flow of processes. So from there, that notification can be picked up and potentially changed into a work order if that is necessary. So having that alignment with existing processes is really important. The end goal of all this is to become a data-driven manufacturing company or organization. I'm going to recap the slide that we had earlier, but now we broke down the wall and we actually built a bridge between the two sides. So we were able to bring people from the left-hand side and, let's say, evolve them from analytics aware to analytics enabled. They can use all of the tools in TrendMiner, the searching capabilities, the pattern recognition, some of the things that Nick will show in his demo, without having to worry about how do I program this, how do I script this, what are the mathematics behind these. While on the right-hand side, the data scientists or the analytics wizards, as we call them, become process enabled. Because now they can actually use all of the business rules that's been set up by the process people, all of the context information, maybe some even of the filters and the pre-processing that the engineers and operator people have implemented. They can now use this to their advantage and really cut down on the time they have to do, let's say, the time-consuming tasks of gathering data and making it available to do their model building on top of it. So we're really about bringing those two sides together. And the end goal that we've seen at a lot of our customers that have been using TrendMiner for a couple of years is that you get into an end state where engineers and operators are able to tackle 80% of their day-to-day analytics, 80% of their day-to-day needs, while the 20% complex problems that really need some in-depth expertise, some really in-depth model knowledge, they can be tackled by the data scientists. And that really reduces on the problems that otherwise could not be tackled by the engineering people, but that the capacity of the data science team would not be able to sustain. Okay. Now, before we go into the demo that Nick will take over, just a quick word on the key capabilities of TrendMiner and some of the things you'll see. Well, it all starts from analyze, monitor, predict. So being able to analyze your process, asking questions like how often have I seen this type of behavior, when did it happen, how frequent does it happen, what is the impact of this problem, what other tags are correlated, what other phenomena in my process are correlated. Going from there to monitoring, so once I've found a certain interesting pattern, a certain combination of conditions, everything I search for in TrendMiner, I can monitor for, so I can set up those alerts with the goal in the end of having, let's say, an early warning system in place if I find patterns that can predict issues that are maybe not critical right now, but I would manifest them as critical issues in a day or 3 weeks from now. That's where you want to go to, and you can have that interaction with the control room to be able to capture those events ahead of time. That's on the time series side. That's really the data domain. There's another domain which we call the context domain. If you really look at a process from, let's say, a simple perspective, you've got your raw materials going in, you've got your process performance and asset performance, which yields, in the end, a certain product yield and a certain product quality. But now if you look back at, let's say, the last 6 months or last 2 years of data that your company has gathered, there's a lot of context around that data that explains certain behavior. For example, there might be some environmental conditions that have changed. There might be some design changes been made or some configuration changes to the DCS system or the SCADA system. There may be some maintenance that is scheduled. So all those pieces of context are important to really understand what's going on the shop floor. And that allows you, if you can bring that information together, to see the whole picture. So maybe you're looking, for example, at what is my benchmark rate or what is my benchmark production rate. You need to know if there's some outside conditions that have, for example, limited the plant throughput to be able to give a correct answer to that question. And that's why it's really important to bring together the time series aspect with the context domain. And how do we do this in TrendMiner? We've developed 3 central hubs that engineers can use or operators can use. First of all, Dashshot. This is where you visualize your results, bring together everything that is important, all your KPIs. Whenever you see something that's out of the ordinary, That's when you jump into the trend domain. That's when you do that analyze, monitor, predict workflow. That's when you're looking for patterns. That's when you're looking for your best operating zones. And whenever I'm done with my analysis, I can tag some events. I can create some context items. And this can also be done automatically. So the next time I see, for example, my production run is too short, or my changeover of pumps is taking too long, again, I can automatically issue an alert to the right personnel. But I can also get this into Context Hub, from where I can very easily jump back into the trend domain. So you really get a self-reinforcing cycle to use to your advantage. Okay, so that is a very brief overview of the key capabilities. I will stop talking now. I'll give the floor to Nick, because he can probably demonstrate it better by showing you the product and walking you through a real-world example where TrendMiner is being used to solve process and asset issues. Okay, Nick, the floor is yours. Screen now. Okay.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm just waiting for the confirmation that my screen has loaded. So, all right, looks like you guys can see my screen. And what you're looking at right now should be one of the 3 products or modules that are inside of TrendMiner. And that's the one that we call Dashshot that Frederick just talked about. So you'll notice in the top left corner right here with the quick toggle, I can easily switch from Dashhub, Trend Hub, and Context Hub. But let's first start by talking about Dashhub and start talking about what we're looking at. So right now we're looking at a dashboard primarily of different pump statuses, but there's also some other KPIs in our plant here. So we can see that in the top row, we have a certain pump status monitor tile that indicates whether we're operating in the ideal operating zone or whether we're malfunctioning. So those are things that I've set up previously, that I've defined what a normal operating zone looks like, what a pump should look like, based on some key KPIs and some sensors around the pump. But part of this demo will actually be showing you how I did that. So you'll see that I've got pumps from the 100 area, 200 area, and 300 area. But there's also a couple other tiles that we see in this dashboard. We have our time series tiles. These indicate time series sensor data that's updating in real time. For example, I have some product tank levels that might be relevant if I'm looking at some product feed pumps, and I can see that these are updating in real time. These are all interactive, so I can hover over and see some data for all of these points. I can hide and display different tags if I want to. I also have an event counter tile. So this P300 anomalies box, this is an event counter. This tells me how many times this monitor above it has come into an alert over the last 1 month. So what I want to do in this demo is also set up a new tile for the P340 pump operation. So you'll notice I don't have a monitor tile set up, but I've got some time series data here. And essentially what I want to look at, one of the main indicators of pump health here is how well we're operating the discharge filter. So we know from past experience that if the discharge filter runs, if the pump runs too long with the foul discharge filter, then we end up having issues with the pump and we have to shut it down and do mechanical repair. So one of the things that's really important for us here is to set up and get an early indicator of when we might have to do that filter change. It's a little difficult to know just based off the differential pressure whether we have to change the filter or not, because there's some variations there based on what product we're running, what quality we're running, but most importantly, what rate we're running, because there's variability in how much this pump puts out. So to do that, to set up a monitor for an ideal operating zone, we can load this view inside of Trend Hub. So I can get to Trend Hub directly from the tile, and you'll notice TrendMiner will open a new tab with the Trend Hub module, and I can go ahead and actually load the view inside of Trend Hub. And what you'll notice is that I'm zoomed into a 2-day period where I've had a filter change. And of course, everything looks pretty messy, but we can easily clean that up since everything's kind of auto-scaled. All the noise is making it look messy. But in TrendMiner, we have different visualizations available. For example, I just switched over into stack trend view, where each tag goes into its own swimming lane, which makes it really easy to see kind of what's going on across this 2-day period. But in this case, I also have a different visualization inside of TrendMiner that can be really helpful for setting up an operating area of where I think this pump should run. And that's the scatter plot functionality. So when I switch to the scatter plot visualization, you'll notice that for each one of my tags, TrendMiner gives me a histogram across the top part of the scatter plot matrix. And what I can start to do is analyze what the distribution was of some of my tags. So for example, I could see here that on the XI0620 tag, that's the valve output on the discharge of the pump, I can see that maybe we were operating in 2 regimes here because I have a bimodal distribution. But what I'm really looking for is a nice correlation that makes sense to me as a subject matter expert. And what jumps out at me the most is the relationship I see here in the top left corner of the screen, and that's the relationship between the flow tag and the differential pressure across the filter. So what I can do now is click and zoom into that scatter plot, and now I see the data in a blown up view. And intuitively, it makes a lot of sense to me, right? As flow increases, the differential pressure across this filter starts to increase exponentially. And that fits my engineering intuition, and it's what I'm expecting to see. So this would be kind of a profile and a relationship for a clean filter. And what I would expect is as the filter fouls, that this relationship gets more extreme, such that for a given flow rate, I have a higher differential pressure. And I'm starting to think, and I want to maybe use that as a monitor. But first I have to validate if there's any noise in the data, if I can even use this profile as a monitor. And TrendMiner makes that really easy. So one of the things I can do is an area search. And I'll explain what that is in a second, but before I can do an area search, I have to capture this non-linear relationship with a polygon in my view. So what I can start to do is kind of draw the bounds of where I consider ideal operation. So I can just click and kind of draw a polygon, and we can go through and close the polygon by double-clicking, and we can adjust this and move it around so we really fit inside of the data. And what this is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to perform a search. So when we talk about searches in TrendMiner, we're talking about searches that help us find events in different time periods. For example, if I want to find an event where I'm operating outside of this operating regime for an extended period of time, in TrendMiner, we refer to that as a search, as an event search. And you can see in TrendMiner, we've got 6 core searches. The one that I'm going to use today is the operating area search, but we also have pattern recognition searches and value-based searches, which allow you to define logical criteria that could help you find different events based on standard Boolean conditions. So what I'd like to do is simply do an operating area search, and you can see here TrendMiner allows me to look for periods where I'm operating either outside or inside of the drawn area. In this case, I want to look for periods where I'm operating outside of the drawn area, and I want to set the duration here to be at least 12 hours, because with standard fluctuations in the process, we might go outside of this regime for a little bit of time and go back in it, and I don't want to have nuisance alarms. So I really want to find periods where I was operating outside of this regime for an extended period of time. So when I click search, TrendMiner will immediately go through all of my historical data, and you can see I get results immediately. I found 5 different periods where I've had this type of event. And what I can start to do is click on these individual events and kind of see what the distribution looked like during this 19-hour period where TrendMiner is telling me that I was operating outside of the regime. So we could see that very clearly. What I was expecting is that as the filter fouls, the relationship gets more extreme, and I can go through a few more of these search results and see if those conditions continue to happen. And we see here's a period in April where it occurred, and we'll click on one more just to see kind of how this relationship's working. And indeed, it holds up well. So now that I've confirmed that this pattern that I've saved on my bivariate scatter plot is a good way to search for filtering fouling events, rather than using this profile to look in the rearview mirror and look at historical data, I can also use this profile to look at real-time data as it streams into the historian. And all I have to do that is to simply save this search. So by clicking the Save button, I can give the search a name. We'll call this P340 Unideal Ops. And when we click Save, this search will become available to us as a monitor. So now if I go to my monitoring panel, you'll notice here I've got P340 Ideal Ops becomes available to me, and I can go ahead and toggle that on as a real-time filter, as a real-time monitor. And there's different ways I can get this notification. For one, I can get an email message or a text message directly from this panel. I could configure that. But one of the other options we have is to automatically create context items. So we talked about context items quite a bit during the introduction. We talked about how important it is to contextualize information, because not everybody's going to have the knowledge that you do about the process. So in this case, I'd like to create a context item also so I can keep track of how often this event occurs. So I'm going to create this on the differential pressure tag. So I can add that to my component here. And then I need to give this context item a type. I'm going to call this anomaly, and we can give this a description. Call this unideal P340 ops. Filter change needed. Okay, and we can scroll down, and we'll also add some keywords here so we can easily retrieve these context items. We'll go with P340, malfunction, and those two keywords should be enough for us to find these events later. Now all we have to do is click save, and from here on out, TrendMiner will monitor these tags in real time, look to see if I'm coming inside of this profile or not, and automatically create a context item and potentially generate an alert to motivate me to take action. But let's go back to the dashboard piece now. Right, ultimately we wanted to add a new tile into our dashboard that tells us periods where we're either inside or outside of the ideal operating zone for P340. So what I'm going to do is click edit and go to actions and click add new tile. And then I'm going to select the monitor and alert tile, and we can give this one a name, P340, and select which monitor we want to be linked to this tile. So it's going to be P340 unideal operations. And then we can just say what we want the text to read in the tile. So I'm going to say filter change needed. And when it's not triggered, I'm going to say operating normally. And then we also have an option here to set the refresh setting of this tile. So 1 minute's probably a little overkill for this tile. So I'm going to set it to 5 minutes. And now I can add a new tile, and you'll see it immediately shows up on my screen here. I can resize the tile, maybe stick it in this little gap right here, resize it a little bit more. Now I've got a nice clean view that I'm happy with, and all I have to do is click Add Actions, save this dashboard, and now I've got a real-time indicator, a real-time notification, alert, something that I can put up in the control room or put up in the morning meeting that we can quickly open up. I don't need to open up a spreadsheet that can crash or get corrupted. I can start to save these things and build up these KPIs right here inside of TrendMiner, and I can be confident that they're going to update in real time with the actual historian data. I don't have to worry about anybody making a typo in a formula somewhere inside of Excel. So that's just one of the many capabilities inside of TrendMiner. With this demo, you've probably seen only about 20 or 30% of the capabilities. There's a lot more, and one of the easiest ways you guys can get in touch with us is just by visiting our website, trendminer.com. And if you're interested in getting a more full-fledged product demo where you see more of our capabilities, on our website you can click on this chat button here in the top right and say, hey, I'm interested in a demo. Thanks for the webinar, if you like the webinar. And after you send that out, immediately a human will reply to you within a couple minutes, and we can start to arrange the next steps for this process. So with that, I want to thank you for your time for the short live demo. I'll hand this back over to Frederick and the rest of the moderators, and I hope to hear from you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So let's continue with the closeout of the presentation before we go into the Q&A section of the webcast. What I would like to do is share a couple of success cases with the audience today, as well as talk about a little bit about the journey. How do you make yourself successful? How do you set yourself up for success implementing new software in general, but TrendMiner self-service analytics specifically? Now, what we've learned from working with doing over 200 implementations so far, the first, let's say, benefit that will occur is kind of the personal kind. People save lots and lots of time. It's not uncommon to hear engineers or operators say, well, what took me 8 hours before, I can do this in 1 hour a week now. So they save almost a day a week to work on other more important problems typically, or spend some time on the more complex problems that they otherwise would have to park because they can never find time to focus for a sufficient amount of time and actually work on these cases. So solving more unsolved cases is almost like a byproduct of saving so much time and having the capability to more advanced analytics. The whole early warning system allows you, or the whole monitoring and early warning system allows companies also to avoid abnormal situations, because just the fact that you're looking so much more at real-time data based on those patterns, based on those conditions you set up, really allows you to focus on what's important, what's coming up during the day or during the week. And finally, you also create a learning organization. Like in a lot of large corporations, people switch jobs every 18 months or every 24 months. So if you want to look back at data that's maybe 3 years ago, it's very hard to get the right content, to get the right people who were involved. Plus the whole collaboration aspect, if you see those events that were created, you can start commenting and start having a conversation. That just creates that learning organization. Also helping organizations that are maybe dealing with an aging workforce to capture all that knowledge that is there and safeguard it for future generations. But don't take just my word for it. Let's just go over a couple of quotes and success stories from our customers. For example, Total, the refining company here, we have a rotating machinery engineer, Fabrice Leclerc, who almost couldn't say it better. TrendMiner, a user-friendly self-service analytics tool, provides us with tremendous time savings and actually delivers better quality results than sometimes the data models can, because they're so easy. As you see, Nick did quite a bit of analyses, had to build 0 models, right? So that whole process can actually lead to even better results. An interesting slide here. So Total saved a lot of money on utility costs, water, air, gas, electricity, and steam. They were able to improve their safety, asset availability, and so on. What I would like you to focus on this chart right here, which they created to when they were analyzing TrendMiner, about the complementarity on top of existing data infrastructure. So as you can see, the blue line right here in the spider chart represents the strengths of TrendMiner, and the green and orange lines represent the strengths of the data historian, OSIsoft, in this case, that they had in place. They can really see OSIsoft, by the way, one of our major partners. These tools are really complementary, right? Where the historians are great at capturing data and historizing it for the long term. TrendMiner can really build on the analytics aspect, and they both work together very strongly. Another quote from Herman Schuster, CDO at Arlexio, once again reiterating that point that you cannot wait until you have a final perfect model using big data tools. It's better to actually work in parallel, right? Have advanced analytics in place while you continue gathering data to fine-tune those models, and they can feed off one another. Maybe the model predicts some results, and you want to see what's going on in your process, you jump back into TrendMiner to do the ad hoc analysis. And in their case, they really were able to generate a lot of benefits on some leakage problems they had, valve leakage in their regeneration process, and a whole list of other examples. If you want to see more, we're a little bit strapped for time now, but if you want to see more, there's a lot of case stories on our website as well. And then finally, at Covestro, again, to go back to the digital spreadsheets title of today, Tim Timmermans telling here, process data tells stories. All you need to do is capture them. That is really important. All the information is stored in your data. You just have to bring it up. And in their case, at Covestro, they did a lot of energy monitoring and consumption checks. And they completely replaced Excel by setting up all the relevant segments and filters in TrendMiner. And if they want to learn, for example, hey, how is my energy consumption doing today? Knowing that this or that unit is switched off and I'm running this or that throughput, all they have to do is enable a couple of filters. And then with the touch of a button, here is a compare table, didn't show it in the demo today, they can actually see what's going on this year to date and the previous 4 years, and they can very easily compare their performance over time. Okay. And then before we go into the what's next, I just want to show you some more of our customer logos. As I mentioned, we've done over 200 implementations so far, so we really know what works. We started off in the chemical industry. That's why you see a dominance in logos there. Some very big logos there, also rolling out globally. But since then, we've expanded into every vertical, basically. So any manufacturing company that has any type of time series data, any type of context data can leverage TrendMiner to make their lives easier and to take the next step by ditching the spreadsheets. Okay, let's say you've decided, you're convinced, I want to go for this. What is next? A couple of learnings from our customer success team that I want to leave you with today before we go into the Q&A section. So what we've seen in types of organizational models, a lot of companies either operate very centralized, meaning that there's going to be a central group responsible for all types of continuous improvement, new software adoption, new ways of working, where on the other hand, there's also the decentralized model where, let's say, every factory facility or even every BU is responsible for its own P&L and is responsible for their own strategy. What we really recommend is this, let's say, hybrid model, a federation model almost, where a central group acts as a facilitator and even, let's say, a driving force behind the strategy that is company-wide, but that uses or that leaves enough independence to each of the BUs or facilities to adopt to their own situation. Maybe they're a little bit further behind in setting up data infrastructure, or maybe they're more advanced in having context in place. But depending on the needs, the central team can really act as a facilitator. With the end goal of becoming really a data-driven organization, the ideal situation is that there's KPIs top to bottom between management in the upper level and operators on the shop floor. And all those KPIs are actually aligned, right? It's very important to have operators actually in their 8 to 12 hour window try and have the same vision, the same goals as management might have for the longer term. And that's why, to become data-driven, these really need to be aligned with one another. So enabling KPIs in TrendMiner, for example, as a backbone to be used for analysis, consistently identifying improvements and benchmarking on a global level is really, really important. Obviously, you don't get there in a day. It takes some time to get to that point. So that's why we have focused on customer success from day one. We start off real small with an onboarding, ensuring that you can see the first value as soon as possible. So really our whole customer success organization is geared towards reducing that first time to value, get you an early success so you can celebrate. And then from there, to the right-hand side, when you're more on a mature level, maybe you're rolled out globally, is our TrendMiner program is in place to coach you to get continuous returns, right? So we know what works in different industries. We have our whole team in place to maximize user productivity by providing proactive support and allowing the organization to pick up their analytics maturity over time. Before I hand it back over to Kevin, why TrendMiner? Real short. Well, first of all, it's a self-service plug-and-play solution. So as I mentioned before, plug-and-play connections to all major data historians, all major types of databases. So it's really, really easy to start. Whatever your deployment model is preferred, if you want to go for on-premise or consume it from the cloud, that doesn't matter to us. We have the unique analytics capabilities that Nick was able to show you let's say, the tip of the spear of today. There's obviously more. So again, if you want to see more, just go to our website. But those unique analytics capabilities make it possible to do more in-depth analysis faster. And then finally, we have a proven path to success. So as I said, don't take my word for it, take our customers' word for it. Even those that have rolled out globally, especially, have they can attest to our proven track record. And that concludes the presentation that we had prepared. So Kevin, back to you.
Well, thanks so much, Frederick. I think the combination of the presentation and the demo really delivers a great snapshot of what you guys do and what your passion is, as we described in the beginning. We do want to now go to the Q&A for our audience. If you haven't sent us your questions, please do so now. So the first question I have, I'm going to address it to Nick. And this has come in from Paul, and Paul asks, does TrendMiner handle or track the actions around the automatic actions generated? For example, was the notification acknowledged, who acknowledged it, and what action was taken?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And yes, we do. So those context items that are created, on top of that context item, there's a lot of collaboration that can happen. So one of the pieces of collaboration that you have on top of a context item is actually a chat functionality where you can communicate and talk to your colleagues, talk to your operators. And then also there's an approval functionality. So you can incorporate different workflows into the context item and then have different stage gates there for approval. There's also change tracking of context items. So basically the workflow that would occur is the context items created. The operator will have a view that shows all the new context items that come in, and you can set different priorities on the context item and then set up some organizational rules. Hey, if the priority is high or number one, however you want to do it, you as an operator, you have to respond. You have to click on there, you have to say which actions were taken, and then an engineer would go in there, approve it, and once the event's over, they can close that context item. And one of the other things you didn't see in the demo today is you can actually add attachments on top of a context item. So if you want to take some pictures in the field or you want to add any kind of attachments, you can go ahead and do that right on top of a context item. So you didn't see it today, but if we go into a deeper demo, I'd be more than happy to share and show you exactly how that process would happen in the software.
Good, thanks, Nick. This is actually a two-part question. The second part of the question, again, I'll address it to you first, Nick, and Frederick, feel free to jump in if you'd like. The second part of the question is, what if you want to implement a purely rules-based notification system? Can I use Python to develop these and implement them into TrendMiner?
Yeah, so our APIs are wide open in TrendMiner, so it's really easy to call TrendMiner's functions from Python or also to post and send things to TrendMiner. But if you do, it depends how complicated your purely rule-based notifications are. There's a lot of capabilities inside of TrendMiner where you can set up different rules, like with a value-based search, you can set up rules like I want to get an alert if this pump is on and the temperature is greater than XYZ for more than 2 hours. Send me an alert, send me a notification. So we can also build that type of logic and those type of rules inside of the TrendMiner application, so you don't have to spend as much time in Python coding. You've got some intuitive GUI tools that you can use inside of the application as well.
Maybe I can quickly jump onto that as well.
Please.
So actually with one of our customers, I talked about the asset framework before and using asset templates. That'd be one way to do certain things at scale. But if you, let's say, don't have an asset framework in place yet, what I wound up doing with a customer was actually set up one of those rule-based conditions. It was actually a little bit more complex. So it involved some calculations, calculating some absolute values, some differences, some derivative values for rate of change analysis, for example. So we combined about 5 or 6 conditions into one. And then after testing it on one particular set of sensors, we actually rolled it out for 1,000 of them. So we kind of validated through the GUI for one, and then used Python. It was a very simple script. I don't think it was even 70 lines of code, including all the authentication. We were able to roll this out for 1,000 of those monitors. So it definitely can feed off one another.
And the only thing I'd add to that is that our team, the customer success team, and the data analytics engineers were usually all very adept at Python and coding. So we can interact and we can speak that language with you guys as well. So we work on a lot of joint projects where we go beyond what the in-app applications are capable of and help our customers expand it with tools like Python, R, and MATLAB.
Great, thanks, Nick. Frederick, a more general question for you. Looking at the marketplace for analytics and the proliferation of analytics, to what extent do you think its proliferation is being inhibited by the fact that the data is so often difficult to access or not found in a form that makes it suitable for analysis?
Right. So that's actually a great question. I'd say that TrendMiner already, just by being able to connect real-time into the historian and by making it very easy to provide people with the right level of access, so you can set up the access levels as you require, already makes that a lot easier. So you don't have to pull this data into Excel, so you don't have data gatekeepers that can only pull it into Excel and have to send it over to you. So that already makes it a lot easier. And as I said, as we are able to connect to any major data historian or SQL type database out there, or through an ODBC connection, there's even many more that we can connect to. You don't have to speak that language anymore, right? So you don't have to know SQL anymore to be able to get to your data. Same with context data that might live in a third-party system, maybe a LIMS system or SAP. Again, not that easy to get it out, even harder to connect it back to your time series data. By setting up the integration with TrendMiner once, you allow so many more people now to interact with that data set. So it actually allows and accelerates companies to get more people to the right level of data by implementing TrendMiner. And let's say even if you're in the case where your data infrastructure might not be fully mature yet, TrendMiner can deal with CSV or Excel file imports. So if you want to get started that way, that is also possible.
Good, thank you. Trying to segue back in here, back and forth between some general questions and some that are more specific. Another one of our listeners asks, we found the presentation very interesting. We already use Power BI as the corporate analysis tool. Is TrendMiner and Power BI complementary? Nick, why don't you try that one first?
Yeah, I can take that one since I've probably got the most experience with using Power BI with process data on the team from my time back at my previous employer. I would say the biggest disadvantage of using BI tooling is it's not really geared toward time series data. So Power BI tools are great for business data that is low frequency when you're calculating when you're pulling up stuff from SAP, such as daily production rates and stuff like that. But when you're working with time series data and you need to have a counter of how many times an event happened in the last 1 hour and things like that, it's a lot easier to have a tool that's already catered towards time series data. So the place that I always struggle the most with Power BI is automatically updating and actually having things stream into real time into those BI tools. But certainly they're complementary. We've actually worked with customers to send our monitors and send out alerts directly to Power BI so that those things can be displayed there. So it's really more so a balance of how real time do you need the data and how much volume of data are you talking about. Because time series data, when you're working with stuff that's being stored on the second interval or the 10-second interval, it can start to really build up and get big, and that's where those that's where all the BI tools struggle, not just Power BI, but pretty much all of them.
And if you want to learn more about this complementarity, I would recommend one of our customers, CP Calco, last year, Norman Ridgely, presented at PyWorld, actually specifically talking about how they leverage Power BI with TrendMiner and the Pi data infrastructure.
Good, thanks, Frederick. Here's another question I'll send to you first, Frederick. One of our listeners asked, can knowing your costs that are involved in using TrendMiner, can you track process improvements and generate an ROI? That's such a common question when it comes to investing in software. Right,
so as TrendMiner is subscription-based, that is a very important question for us as well, and that's the sole responsibility of the customer success team to deliver value. So I'd say typically our business case, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation, we'll work with you together to prove that, for example, the time savings are real, and that we actually, when we come on site, when we do an onboarding, we ask the customer to select 2, 3, 4 use cases that they want to analyze using TrendMiner. And we'll just come in and work on those use cases together and prove the value just in a couple of days by working on those pre-selected use cases. So it's really the customer as they decide to use self-service analytics. We coach them. Obviously, we have a whole backlog of pre-existing use cases that we solve with other customers, so we know what can be done in TrendMiner. And we'll work with the customer to solve a couple of those on their own data, so they can kind of see the applicability on their own data set, and then we work from there towards a complete business case.
Great, thanks, Frederick. Nick, a question for you. I think another one. This will be definitely be in your wheelhouse. What tools exist for cleaning data? For example, to remove data from unit processes when they are temporarily shut down, so that you don't have extraneous data involved.
Right, that's a great question because we use this functionality in TrendMiner a lot, and we simply call it filters. So in TrendMiner, it's really easy to set up conditional filters that will basically filter out or remove data from a data set based on some criteria that you set up. So any of our searches that we do inside of TrendMiner can also be used to filter out data. So, for example, the demo that we did, if we wanted to filter out data to remove periods where the filter was plugged and just focus on periods where the filter was clean, we can easily do that with the search capabilities. So typically the type of searches that we use the most for filtering, such as when the plant is shut down, is using the value-based searches. So typically there might be a combination of some motors, maybe a compressor's not running when you're down, or a pump's not running when you're down, or a valve is closed. We can build all that in a value-based search and then use that search as an automatic filter that we can toggle on in TrendMiner. And by saving that filter, we always have it accessible to us. We only need to build it once, and then we can refer back to it whenever we do an analysis. And then we also have functionalities inside of TrendMiner to do aggregation. So for example, if you have a really noisy tag, or if you have some busy missing data, we have different functionalities in TrendMiner that you can use to smoothen out noise and things like that.
And those are typically those quick wins, right? So during onboarding, we can focus on a couple of those quick wins that already saves loads of time, because those type of filters, they can be reused all over and over again, and you don't have to go through the same steps every time.
Great. Thanks, Frederick. A number of years ago, I was at an OSI Soft user conference, and I was walking into a presentation, and two guys were ahead of me, and the one turned to the other and said, "He's supposed to be solving problems, not just building spreadsheets." So, that people in engineering, they love their spreadsheets. So to say we want to go beyond spreadsheets, is the engineering community, Nick, enthusiastic about moving beyond their reliance on spreadsheets? Are they ready to embrace analytics? And what is your take on the mood of the potential user community out there?
Yeah, so for me, the biggest thing is that, in this industry, the engineers, especially the ones on the manufacturing floor, are very busy. They've got a lot of different responsibilities they have to juggle. There's plant issues that come up. You work on a lot of safety things like PHAs and HAZOPs. So engineers are very busy. So if they're able to really get some good analytics done in 30 minutes and 45 minutes in between meetings, in between their busy days, they really appreciate that. And if you can prove to them that it's a useful tool that can help them save that much time, that can really increase the throughput of problems that they can analyze and investigate, the adoption becomes very easy. So in general, I would say most engineers that I work with, they have kind of a love-hate relationship with Excel. It's really great for certain things, but they typically recognize that a lot of times we go too far with Excel and spreadsheets and do a lot of things that could be better done with better software, but that software just hasn't existed in the past. And what we're seeing now is that not just in the self-service area, but other areas of the industry, such as logbooks and different type of software, there's a lot of these things coming out now that can really replace a lot of the traditional tooling and a lot of the different workflows that we use Excel for. And from what I've seen, pretty much everybody is open-minded to that.
Good. Thanks, Nick. Frederick, a question for you. Can you discuss how TrendMiner would work with EAM software, enterprise asset management software such as IBM Maximo? Can a summary be created to list identified issues by location, asset, date ranges? Is there a way to note or mark status of identified issues to track what you've done?
Right. So let me start with the first part of that question. I think it's important. I think this is a prime example of the type of context data that can enrich your time series data. So bringing over information from a tool like IBM Maximo to identify what's going on your different assets, and then we didn't show context of today in detail, but what you can do from there, all of the events can be filtered and segmented. So you can really zoom into, for example, what has happened over the last 7 days on all of these assets in this production area or below for a certain type of event or for a certain piece of equipment, like show me all the pumps. Right? So we can really slice and dice using that information that is available. And then from there, either your analysis is complete, maybe that's all what you wanted to do, or you can jump into the time series domain to start analyzing what is going on. That is one direction of the integration. The second direction would be to shoot those alerts, those notifications from TrendMiner back into other systems. So maybe they are let's say the system of record. They are always the source of truth. So you want to enrich that data source with automatic analyses done in TrendMiner. So you can send that information back. To answer the second part of the question, so marking the status, I think Nick already talked a bit about this. So having the ability to comment, approve context items, and have a whole, let's say, history of events, so modification list, allows you to do that. And we can also pick up updates from the source of truth and synchronize them with TrendMiner.
Great, thanks, Frederick. The final question for today, since we're out of time, is that CFE Media recently did a survey of our engineering audience and asked how many of them agreed with the statement. Engineers and others seeking to successfully advance their careers must address the challenges, embrace the opportunities brought by new technologies that can integrate and analyze data to support decision making. So in other words, how do you see, I mean, we've gotten a lot of great questions, we've gotten a lot of great software that can be integrated with TrendMiner. In the context of an engineer's career, how do you see that evolving over time, and what leads to success? Nick, I'll ask you to comment first.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is there's a lot of tools out there, and starting to build a software tool, getting an early version of a software tool, isn't the most difficult thing. But building software that's actually reliable, that's performant, that can handle the load that you put on it is actually very difficult. So I do see some resistance sometimes from engineers to embrace new technologies. And I would say the biggest reason for that is because they've been burned before. They've been burned by software that doesn't work, that doesn't meet their standards, that doesn't meet their expectations, and a lot of times that's software that's been pushed down from the top down. So what we've seen is you need a kind of a two-phase approach. It needs to be both bottom up and top down. So you want to get buy-in from the people that are going to be using the tools before you fully roll out the tools, to make sure that they understand the values and the usefulness. And certainly, I think everybody at this point agrees, like from your survey there, 96% agree that there's a lot to be gained, right, from embracing new technologies, because the way we're doing things right now aren't sustainable, and they're not the most efficient way to do things. I don't know if you want to add to that, Frederick.
No, I completely agree, Nick.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, you guys. That's all the questions we have time for today. We'd like to thank our expert panelists, Frederick and Nick, and we'd like to thank our audience for attending. We hope the presentation suited your purposes. For more information, go to the website, links noted in the interface. And also realize that we're going to compile answers to all the questions, both those answered during the course of the webcast and those that we didn't have time to get to, and either send them to you by email or have them posted on the website with the archived version of the webinar. Finally, I'd like to thank TrendMiner for sponsoring today's webcast. And now that we're just about done, we want to hear how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as this webcast ends. Please take a moment to complete it as we use this information to approve our webinars. On behalf of CFE Media and Technology, we look forward to seeing you next time.